Hello, heroes. Well, this is episode 10. The 1,000 ships arrive. So, last episode, Agamemnon, commander-in-chief of the Greek forces, sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia to the goddess Artemis in order for his ships to be able to leave the port. This episode is all about what happens once those Greek ships arrive in Troy. Now, sometime before the ships arrive, Helen and Paris arrive in Troy, and they probably had quite a long time before the Greeks arrived because, it takes a lot of time to amass all those men, get all the supplies, get on the ships, and then, of course, the ships couldn't sail for a long time. And then, once they did sail, it would have taken them a long time to get from Mycenae to Troy. So, Paris and Helen have come to Troy. Who knows what their reception is? I don't know how angry people would have been with Paris. I don't know. If it were me, I would have been super angry with my brother if he had come home with somebody else's wife, and that act was going to bring war upon my people. Hector has every right to be mad at his younger brother, Paris, because you see, Hector is a stand-up guy. He's honorable. He's one of my favorite characters in Greek mythology because he's the typical oldest child. He has all this responsibility resting on his shoulders, and he takes it on. This is not the war that he wanted to fight. He would have chosen not to, but here it is on his doorstep, his younger brother bringing in somebody else's wife, and it's not like he doesn't kick her out. He treats her cordially, and, the Greeks are going to come, and Hector knows that it's his duty to get his army ready and all up to snuff so they can meet the enemy. Hector is going to take command of the Trojan forces. As heir to the kingdom, that's totally appropriate. The Trojans are lucky because in their leader, Hector, they have a great leader. So now would probably be a good time to talk about the advantages and disadvantages that each side is wrestling with. Okay, let's start with the Greeks since they're the invaders. The Greeks are a huge force, which is an advantage to them. However, they're coming from a long way away, so somehow this huge fighting force is going to need to be fed, and their houses are not nearby. So that's a real detriment to the Greek forces. They constantly, throughout the 10 years of the Trojan War, the Greeks are going to have to figure out how they can forage for enough food. And oh my gosh, another huge disadvantage, if the Greeks lose men in battle, there's no way for them to replace them. If the Trojans lose men in battle, they've got the city inside the walls. They've got families in there with boys who, throughout the 10 years of the Trojan War, many of them come of age and are able to start fighting. So at least the Trojans have some way to replenish some of the men that they lose as casualties during the war. The Greeks, not so much. One of the two huge advantages that the Greeks have are, number one, Odysseus with his super crafty battle strategy abilities. He's just a master strategist, and he gets the Greeks out of a lot of tough spots just by using his noggin. So Odysseus is a great advantage. Achilles is probably their biggest advantage. Even though he's supposedly only 15 years old when the Trojan War begins, this 15-year-old guy is a phenomenal warrior. It's like he was born to wield a sword. When he gets into battle, he just goes. The Norsemen would have called him a berserker because when he's in battle, he fights, and if he gets injured, it doesn't even bother him. Well, his mom dipped him in the river Styx, so if he gets injured, it's not going to hurt him that badly, but he just keeps going. He doesn't know the meaning of the word exhaustion. He just kills. He's a killing machine. In fact, it was said of Achilles that in any one short battle lasting a couple of hours, he was known to kill hundreds and hundreds of men. So Achilles is a huge advantage to the Greeks, and pretty much as long as he's fighting, the Trojans are going to have a tough time because he can best every one of their fighters. A disadvantage that the Greeks have, aside from the fact that they're a long way from home and they have no way of replacing their dead soldiers or their food except for going around and scavenging and raiding neighboring villages all the time. And a huge disadvantage for the Greeks is their leader, Agamemnon. Agamemnon is a leader who leads by fear. And anytime you have someone who does that, he's not going to have the complete allegiance of his men. They'll do what he says because they might be scared of what the consequences might be if they don't, but they're not going to really be fully invested. And a lot of his men don't trust him. After all, they saw him kill his own daughter. That's pretty drastic. I mean, that sends if Agamemnon was ready to kill his own daughter, he is not going to risk his life for any of his fighting men. And they know it. So they're not going to want to risk their lives for him. Agamemnon has a lot of brute strength, not too much smarts, doesn't have a lot of people skills, so he's not a very good leader, as we'll see. Hector, on the other hand, leader of the Trojan forces, he is amazing. He would lay down his life for his men, and they know it. He would never, ever ask anybody in his army to do anything that he wouldn't be willing to do himself. And so he feels deeply about his fighting force, about each individual person, and he makes that apparent to them. These are his countrymen that he's fighting alongside. Many of them are his brothers. So yeah, he wants to protect them. He is very motivated to lead his forces to beat the Greeks because he's fighting for his family, his home, his kingdom, for the safety of everybody who's relying on him. And he does a great job. Paris, on the other hand, he's a lover, not a fighter. He brought this war to Troy by bringing Helen to Troy, but he's not all about fighting. You know, he is not trained as a warrior, so he pretty much just hangs around and tries to stay in the background. He's pretty good with a bow and arrow because he did learn how to use that on the mountainside, but other than that, doesn't have a lot of martial skills. So Paris is not that much of an advantage. Probably aside from Hector's excellent leadership and the fact that Troy has a huge population that can help to replenish their goods, and plus they have a lot of resources inside the city. You know, the Greeks, the first thing they do is they lay siege to the city to prevent anybody from leaving or going in. But it doesn't, it makes it hard for the Trojans, but they still have a lot of resources. They have a fresh water source within the walls of the city. They have livestock. They have their gardens. So, they'll have to cut back, but they can feed themselves. For 10 long years, they can feed themselves. But really the biggest advantage, other than those things that the Trojans have, is that they have this really, really high, thick, strong wall that completely surrounds the city. There's only one way in and one way out of Troy, and that is through what they call the Scaean Gates. Now, this wall is so tall and so thick, and it goes down so deep that the Greeks are unable to penetrate it. They try scaling it, going over, doesn't work. They try knocking it down, too strong, doesn't work. They try tunneling underneath, too deep, it doesn't work. Nothing the Greeks try can breach the walls of Troy. It's completely defensible. All the Trojans have to do is go on top of the wall and drop hot oil and shoot arrows off the top, and it's a huge advantage. And if there's a battle going wrong for the Trojans, all they have to do is run back and retreat through the Scaean Gates, shut the gates, the Greeks can't get in, and the Trojans are safe. So what happens is you've got 10 long years where the Greeks will win a battle, the Trojans will win a battle, the Greeks will win a battle, the Trojans will win a battle. It keeps going back and forth, and no one side has any distinct advantage. until a couple of events start happening that change it up a little bit. We'll hear about them in the next episode.